my name is Katie, and I'm going to be talking about the project that I did for our class, and I ended up mapping poultry farms in Cherokee Nation Reservation. So, the history of poultry farming in Northeast Oklahoma is really interesting. Worldwide, poultry production is increasing with the projected output reaching 138 million tons by 2025. And this really highlights the industry's growing economic importance. Um, and especially with Tyson just being located in Northwest Arkansas, it's really close for them to buy up land here in Northeast Oklahoma, which is Cherokee Nation Reservation, and then transport these birds back over to their processing facilities. And so Cherokee Nation Reservation has really seen a rapid increase in poultry farming, adding millions of birds in the recent years. Really, since 2018, we saw a huge boom, and then intensifying in these regional concerns here. And then, of course, when we do have so many poultry farms, when we do have so many birds that are concentrated in certain areas, the runoff from poultry farm contaminants, whether it's from the farms themselves or from farmers bringing in poultry litter and being spread on their land, but the runoff from rain has a really high potential to contaminate the nearby rivers and streams, which obviously can affect water quality and disrupt ecosystems through harmful eutrophication, which I'll talk a little bit about a little bit later. And so not only is there an environmental concern here with water quality, this can also mean that there are cultural impacts. So pollution, in this case, has the potential to threaten Cherokee ceremonies, particularly our going to water ceremony, and then also traditional food gathering, and then outdoor cultural practices as well. So this really raises concerns not only environmentally, but for the loss of our heritage and health risks. So I really wanted to ask a few questions with my research. The first question is, how many poultry feeding operations are in Cherokee Nation Reservation, and the new and expanding ones? Where are they located? And then how many of these poultry farms are located less than a half a mile from a water source slash sacred site? And the reason why I said water source slash sacred site is because in Cherokee culture, water, waterways are referred to with personhood, and given names that indicate that these are living, breathing ecosystems. So Cherokee people specifically have a ceremony called going to water, and you can go to water anywhere there's water. And so anywhere there's a river, lake, or stream that could potentially be used as a ceremonial site, which makes all water in Cherokee Nation Reservation sacred. So I wanted to address these questions throughout the research. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about my methods. I was able to put in a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request to the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, and I was able to obtain the poultry farm records from 2018 to 2024. So this included the location, the bird count, and then a few details about the owners. And so I took these data, I organized it in Excel. I got rid of any columns that I didn't think was really necessary, because we all know how to clog up ArcPro. That's not something that we really want. So we got rid of all the things that were unnecessary. Yes, remove the duplicates. the fields were standardized, and then the formats were then verified to prepare the data set for ArcPro. And so in this case, it looked like latitude, longitude, and then it was able to read the locations in that way. So I used ArcGIS Pro once the data was cleaned, and imported it. Yes, I mentioned the latitude and longitude, and then this created the points that represented each poultry farm. And once I did that, I was able to put a half-mile buffer, and it was generated around all water bodies, so rivers, major streams, and lakes. And then I used a spatial join to identify which poultry farms were within these culturally significant zones. And then I had to really think about how I wanted to represent that. So of course, when I was using the buffers, I used that to answer my question, how many poultry farms are, within half a mile of a poultry farm. But I also wanted to think about how I could communicate that really well. And I decided to take the buffers off, um, and just kind of leave the sacred sites, aka the water, and then leave the poultry farm locations, and then decided to put a little pin, as you'll see later, represented in the results section, to indicate which poultry farms were actually close, within 1/2 mile, to a source of water. So the results from this were really interesting to me. Um, for the farm scale, all 31 operations were classified as large-scale poultry farms, which, if you know the difference between a CAFO and the PFO, and the history that Oklahoma has gone through, the hoops, they've kind of created this loophole of the PFO, a poultry feeding operation, um, with less strict regulations that farms can register under, and they don't have to adhere to as many rules as the CAFO. So the first year actually that Oklahoma decided to implement the PFO program, we saw a 90% decrease in applications for CAFO. So obviously that loophole is working. So of the 31 operations that were new and expanding, all of them were classified as large-scale PFOs, with flock size ranging from 19,000 to 120,000 birds, with a total of around 892,800 new birds added to Cherokee Nation Reservation since 2018. And then, of course, the corporations that run these farms, that was something important to me. So the major poultry corporations included Aviagen, Tyson Foods, of course, Simmons Foods, Cobb Ventures, and Cook's Venture, and OK Foods, which was obviously one of the biggest integrators here that had the most birds. And that's indicated in the top right here. And then I noticed that there were spatial clusters, so farms were concentrated in rural areas, especially around Westville, Muldrow, and then really smaller towns, with Gore, which is a really well-known Cherokee community, actually. And then, of course, one of the big questions was how many farms are located within a half mile of a sacred site, which is water. And I was able to locate 10 farms, which is around 32%. So 32% of poultry farms in Cherokee Nation Reservation are located within a half mile of a water body. And then the collective housing over 325,000 birds. So this obviously raises concerns for Cherokee cultural practices as well, as a cultural risk. Sorry, it won't let me go to the next slide for some reason. So what I really want to highlight here is a discussion, and I really want to talk about how this study can highlight the serious environmental and cultural consequences of large industrial poultry farming. We're not against chicken farms. I mean, I have a small flock myself. It's when we're farming in these really big, unsustainable ways that creates a lot of waste and then puts extra nutrient loads and stress on our water bodies that support really, really important species of fish and ecosystems that can only survive in some of these creeks and rivers that maintain, especially the spring-fed springs and creeks that support the fish that really need that temperature to survive. And so through the spatial analysis, to me, that really revealed that nearly 1/3 of the poultry operations are located within half a mile of the sacred water sources and could potentially stop us meaning Cherokee people, from participating in ceremonies like our going to water ceremony. So these sites really now face this increased risk of nutrient pollution, as well as algae growth, as you saw on my slide before this. Um, and then, of course, habitat degradation, which is linked, that could potentially lead to the decline in the availability of culturally important plants, culturally important species, like river cane and watercress, cochin, the yellow cutleaf coneflower. And then, of course, community members have already reported visible ecological damage and the loss of traditional food practices when these large-scale poultry farms are able to pollute the waterways, and when there aren't upper limits for phosphorus and E. coli and these types of things in the non-scenic river and stream systems. So I think that the findings emphasize that there is a huge need for stronger land use policies and, of course, respect for indigenous cultural sites, especially when these large corporations are coming over and leave us with the environmental fallout. And then I think there needs to be a call for increased tribal involvement as well in environmental governance to protect both the natural resources and cultural heritage of Cherokee Nation Reservation. And, something that we all can do is start on at your nearest water body. For me, it's Spring Creek Coalition here. Pay attention, get involved in water testing. I know that our group has been water testing for the past 4 or 5 years to generate our own evidence. And also, if you can think of a good research project to do, there's so many, and we need people to do it. So, yeah, we need people to generate evidence, and hopefully this project was one way to do that. Thanks so much for listening.